Hey guys, T-Bull here. Today we got a little bit of science going on here. We got Ciliax on the screen here. Von Hipper inspiration. That means we're checking out the full secondary build on the Bismarck. Now I don't have a huge level Von Hipper. In fact, he's kind of a mid-range. Level 11, probably Legendary 2 would be my guess. So there's a little bit of room to stretch that out even more. But if you notice there, my range on those secondaries on this build, just shy of 11 kilometers, 10.9. That's with both secondary themed modules on the ship. Pretty much everything that improves the secondaries. We went balls to the wall in this build. Normally, I really don't like playing this ship that much. I have it set up just because you guys constantly ask for it on the stream, and I figure, what the hell. But currently, I'm on the last stage of the Grosser Kurfürst, and this is part of the requirements. And I actually like playing this on AI. Now you'll notice how I play this. I don't fire the main guns. I move them around as though I'm playing, just because practice is practice. But I just kind of try and get in between these lanes. If you've played AI much at all, you kind of know they spawn in 3 different locations like your team does, and then they just kind of sail in you in 3 straight different lines. So once you kind of figure out where those lines are, you can position this Bismarck in between those lines, and you'll get the secondaries firing off both sides of your ship. So it's kind of fun to do this in AI just because you can actually get in close. Usually I don't like this build as much for randoms just because most of your teammates are going to sit way back, not supporting you, and the ship really becomes fun when it's medium to close range. You'll see a lot of these in random battles parked fully broadside all the way in the back with the John Barts and the Iowas, which is just not how you want to be playing the ship. But here today, since I've been using the ship as part of those AI missions and just been testing the secondaries on them, I figured I'd show you kind of 2 different sides of the coin. Now, I've played about 10 games in this, give or take a game or 2, but this first game here is going to be the highest damage game that I've gotten in that test sample. Second game is going to be the highest number of target hit ribbons that we get from these secondaries. And you'll notice those are 2 different things. In fact, second game we get over twice as many hits, less than half as much damage. So my feelings on these builds, the secondaries in particular, they're add-on bonuses. But like all things Battleship and all things German Battleship in particular, results are randomized, okay? How well these things perform, it depends on numerous factors. How many battleships are you shooting at? How many cruisers, destroyers? Because the battleships, you'll occasionally score a scoring blow once in a while, but usually most of the damage against battleships, or the effectiveness against the battleships, is getting these numerous strikes on them over and over again and setting fires, cycling through their damage control parties, and gradually building up the damage that way. Whereas if you get destroyers, cruisers that are close range to you, your guns will actually reliably penetrate those targets, assuming they're hitting, and then you'll be getting the raw damage from the shells hitting the targets plus the fire bonus damage. So that's part of the randomized nature of it. How willing are the team, or the red team, destroyers and cruisers, willing to get to you? And, are you closer to battleships, or, what is the composition of the enemy team? So that's out of your control. Whether your team will allow you to move in, i.e., will they support you? Will they play the way that will allow your team to move forward as a whole? Because you moving forward as a single ship against 9 backline red players and in front of 8 backline blue players, it just isn't going to work. Everyone on the red team will focus you, they'll bomb on you, they'll kill you. So, and, we're focusing on the Bismarck because this is kind of the primary, secondary build type of ship in the game. In fact, they even dumbed down the Grosser Kurfürst's secondaries just to keep this thing quote-unquote special. So for secondary builds, this is kind of the ultimate version. And if you want to view the secondary damage that you can get as tack-on damage, i.e., let's say you get 150,000 damage with your main guns, which is a pretty solid game in the Bismarck, plus another 50,000 as we are crossing the 50,000 threshold in this game. If you get another 50,000 passive damage from these secondaries going off, all of a sudden you got a 200,000 damage game. That's a 33% increase in damage in that particular instance, which is outstanding. And in those situations where you can get that to work, the build is going to be solid. The problem is, how reliably can we get 150k damage with main guns where we're taking away all of the accuracy boosts and moving them to secondaries? We're putting on Von Hipper instead of other different perks that can either keep you alive longer or improve your offensive prowess in other ways. So the more attention we're paying to these secondaries, the less resources go into our ship's build for the main guns, for the durability of the battleship, however else you'd be spending the points. Everything's a trade-off. And again, this out of a sample size of roughly 10 AI games, which, keep in mind, those are very quick games. Usually they're about 5 to 8 minutes long. Hard to get huge damage games in those just because the AI is as suicidal as your typical blue team destroyer player would be. They don't tend to last very long, so it's hard to get huge amounts of damage. But this following game here, we're going to see way more hits landed. That was actually a relatively low hit landed type of game, this previous game that we just saw, out of my sample size. This one, on the high end, I think the average is probably somewhere in between the hits landed per game in these two different games. So keep that in mind. But again, like I noted earlier, the damage drop-off is going to be much lower. And basically why that is we're going to be close-range dueling battleships. Now, usually, if you're running the Bismarck in its natural settings, in player versus player modes, you're more inclined to get close up with these battleships and get in a brawling battleship versus battleship type of situation. Most good cruiser players aren't going to get anywhere near a Bismarck. Most good destroyer players aren't going to get anywhere near a Bismarck. So it's going to be very hard for those secondaries to be landing their hits against lightly armored targets. And that's when the damage drops. Because when we're landing these secondaries on heavily armored targets, as we're going to see in this game, then most of the raw damage goes away, and most of the damage that we're left with is fire burning damage, which is good. It's nice passive damage to have. How much build resources do we want to devote to that type of a build, though? I don't know. But, it is fun. It is fun to play these games. If you're playing human players and both teams cooperate and allow you to get into these nice prolonged brawling situations, then the Bismarck is one of the most fun ships, in my opinion, to play in the game. The problem I have with the Bismarck is, again, usually the people that you're playing with, both on your team and the red team, are not in the mood to allow you to have fun with this ship. Most enemy battleship players will be sitting way back, barely in range to hit anyone on your team, let alone let you get that close to them. And again, destroyers, cruisers, they should by now be fairly well conditioned to avoid this ship. So, you can counter that with saying, well, good Bismarck players, good German battleship players in general, can figure out ways to get their ship doing what it's doing best. And I can agree with that. Of course, that's true with any ship that you can name in the game. But kind of look on the screen here where we're at right now. We're basically jammed in between four ships that are approaching us on both broadsides. Now, currently, yes, we are properly angled against these ships on the right, at least. This guy over here is the Mogami's sneaking up into, danger zone territory on our left, even though that's not the most threatening ship to the Bismarck at that range. But this is kind of the positioning that you really need to make these secondary builds shine. You need close available targets on both sides, and our gunners, our secondary gunners in this position like this, they'll be firing on reload constantly until they're knocked out by incoming HE shells. But if you're going against good, competent human players, kind of intentionally jamming your battleship in between, surrounding red team formations while they have access to your broadsides, potentially access to both of your broadsides, those guys aren't going to be missing as many shots as these computer robots tend to miss, and they're going to aim a little bit better. Not saying the AI doesn't occasionally blast you very well, but my point is it's more dangerous to get into these situations where you're going to get really effective, results with the secondaries. And look at those purple ribbons just going crazy on the right hand side of the screen. I mean, it is fun. It's like the 4th of July year round on this thing. And, you'll see we're getting, that would be a close quarters combat medal in player versus player here. Again, that was a cruiser, so we're able to do more damage here. But keep an eye on the damage. Look at all these ribbons we got, and we're just crossed 15,000 damage here. Now, yes, if we're playing the game, actually, the main guns would be involved. And at this range, yeah, we might be scoring some pretty decent damage with those guns as well. Yes, the turtleback at this range protects the Citadel from these battleships. So this is kind of the Bismarck's natural environment to be in these close quarter brawls. I get that. But let's just say, I think average skill level players, human players, would have sunk this Bismarck by now, pretty much no problem. Another thing you want to keep in mind if you're considering these secondary type builds, a lot of HE spam that battleship players tend to complain about already. But if we're focusing on building a ship and maximizing its secondary guns, keep in mind, those secondaries get knocked out by incoming HE fire quite readily. So secondary builds, by their very nature, they start off the beginning of the game at their peak performance, and then gradually over time they diminish in effectiveness. But if you're under sustained fire from like a Cleveland or Chapayev, Kutuzov, some of those ships, even you can throw in the Megami, Otago, Charles Martel, any of those ships that are going to be firing nice, effective HE shells at you for prolonged periods of time, potentially, that can destroy all of your secondary guns. So by the time you're even able to get into these positions where you're this close to the enemy team, and usually it takes a bit longer for these games to develop and these positions to develop with human players rather than AI players, which are quite, they're not that careful in what they're trying to do. Let's just put it that way. But look at this position right here. I mean, we're just chalking up, hit. We're still we don't even have 25,000 damage here. So this is what I was talking about earlier. If we're primarily dueling battleships close range, where are we getting the damage from? Fires. This is an example of a low RNG type of result with our fires. We're not getting that many fires started here. We probably, in a typical game, would have more fires on average started than now. So the damage output should likely be higher. But that's the way it rolls sometimes. We are playing a game where there is luck involved. There are dice rolls involved. And when we keep coming up with snake eyes every time and we're not getting those fires, well, then again, how much we've sacrificed our main gun performance, we're going to be diminishing our total damage in those type of situations where Lady Luck isn't on our side. Now, if you're watching this video in the future, keep in mind that they are currently examining ways to change secondary performance, so maybe the results will be much better in the future and they'll make these type of builds much more attractive. But this is kind of how secondaries came to us out of the box. They haven't really changed in terms of game mechanics since launch, but it is what it is. Like I say, it's very randomized. A lot of their performance is out of your control. Yes, when they really are kicking it into high gear, they can be a lot of fun, and they can actually be quite effective, in terms of their addition to your damage pool. But concurrently, we have games like this where luck isn't on our side, and everything we've sacrificed in terms of main gun performance, battleship durability, that's all out the window. That's a sunk cost. We can't get that back. And then when we get bad luck with the secondary damage, well, we're just kind of screwed in that point. So anyway, that was a look at the secondaries on the Bismarck for you guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope it gave you something to think about. If you did like it, please hit the thumbs up. New to the channel, consider subscribing. A lot of World of Warships coming all the time. Questions, comments, leave below. Love to hear from you guys. And we'll see you later. All right, peace.